And so she suggested I come to their upcoming drum major auditions. I'm like, okay, let's see how I'm feeling that weekend, because I got out my wisdom teeth 3 days prior to that weekend that she wanted me to come to. And like a lunatic, I went.
Hello, and welcome to episode 18 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of June 24th, 2024. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including updates from Morgan State and Metallica, a band-related dad joke, I dip my toes into the dangerous waters of This Ain't Your Grandfather's Drum Corps, and I have a conversation with an award winner. I'm your host, Rob Hamilton. Hello, dear listener. Okay, here goes. Tuesday, June 25th, tomorrow, as this podcast drops, is Global Beatles Day. Sunday, June 30th, is World Social Media Day. Late last week was the summer solstice, so here we are officially in summer now, here in the Northern Hemisphere at least, and I make note of this because, yes, BandWagon has listeners in Australia, everybody. Hello to you all. I'm not going to say good day. I'm not qualified. Anyway, you know what that means? It's time for Summer Drum Corps competition season to kick into gear. This episode has at least passing references to all of that. Let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline, Baltimore, Maryland. Thanks on this to the reporting of WBAL-TV and the staff writers at the online publication Because of Them We Can. On Friday, June 7th, the Morgan State University Magnificent Marching Machine made parade and standstill concert appearances during the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the invasion of Normandy in World War II. The Morgan State performances marked the first time that a historically black college or university band has participated in this event. The band also marched in a parade at Disneyland Paris. Band director Jareem Reed, Sr. said, quote, "It is bigger than the band. Our students have been prepared and educated on what this means." The trip was especially meaningful for Reed since his grandfather participated in the D-Day invasion. Band member Adriana Santiago said, quote, "An honor is something I keep saying, but really is something to be astonished of because at the end of the day, we are young people of color, and to have our own place in history, to be the first HBCU to do this, it's something to look back on and say, we paved the way, essentially." Dateline, the Internet. The rock band Metallica have announced that their marching band competition is returning for a second year. A spokesperson for the band said that the response to last year's first ever marching band competition, quote, completely blew us away, as more than 500 colleges and high schools in the United States submitted interpretations of Metallica's songs. The band sign-up process is open now through September 23rd. Last year's winners included Oakton High School from Vienna, Virginia, Byrne High School from Texas, Malvern High School from New York, Dobbins-Bennett High School from Kingsport, Tennessee, Eastern New Mexico University, and Auburn University. This year's competition will offer 3 times as many chances to win. Each of the original categories, Division I and Division II and III college bands, and small, medium, and large high school bands, has now been expanded to include awards for first, second, and third place in each category, with winners in each category to be selected by the members of Metallica. Competition winners will receive instruments and gear for their school's music programs, sponsored in part by Sweetwater. For more information or to sign your band up, you can visit metallicamarchingband.com. And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. After this quick break to hydrate, it's hot out there, more BandWagon. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this week's second strain, I got a problem, and it's with Facebook, but it's not necessarily what you might expect. My Facebook feed, when I can get it to show me anything other than 13 ads in a row, or Facebook groups or personalities that Facebook is convinced I should join or follow, even though those pages often contain nothing of interest to me, which therefore convinces me that the mighty algorithm hasn't got me pegged after all. And all that constitutes a separate problem not to be dealt with in this space. My Facebook feed is full of glorious people. I'm happy to say that my friends, many of whom are, unsurprisingly, band people, make up a subset of humanity that anyone would be proud to be associated with. So positive most of the time, and when they're not, it's for a good cause, or it's because of something that causes lots of other of my friends to jump into the comment section and commiserate or try to help. It's just a pack of decent people. My Facebook problem, rather, is that thanks to these fine friends of mine, it's such a kind, decent echo chamber that I can sometimes forget that the social media world can be as toxic as it is. Which brings me to a band-related Facebook group, the members of which would probably rise up as one and demand that I retract that statement because drumcore isn't banned and don't suggest that it is because it isn't. Okay. It's got horns and drums. You blow through them or you beat on them. It's got flags and rifles, and you swing and chuck those. It's got drill, and you march that drill on a green field with white lines. Yeah, and some of the people in that Facebook group can't even agree on whether football yard lines ought to be used. Sigh. The Facebook group is called I Don't Support DCI. And they're not talking about whatever machinations are coming out of DCI headquarters in Indianapolis, or about the occasional member abuse news item that emerges from this core or that. That's not what's riling the group up. If you're a faithful listener of this podcast and a fan of or a participant in drum corps from before about 1979, I'm going to apologize to you for what the next few paragraphs will be, and I'm going to trust that you don't present yourself and your interest in the marching arts in the difficult way that this Facebook group seems to do. Back in my day, this seems to be an online group where people can go to wish life were not as it is. For example, to wish that the modern marching activity included more hornline and drumline uniforms and fewer costumes, to wish that it included more color guard uniforms that related somehow to their corps, to wish that drum corps repertoires included more musical content that you might actually go away humming. And in a lot of ways, I don't disagree with any of those thoughts. My apologies, but in their title-winning year of 2016, the Bluecoats managed to design and wear a costume that flattered exactly nobody. Ironically, the swirly blue design on the front of those otherwise all-white body-hugging outfits was a direct visual quote from their logo of the mid-1980s. But man, at least to my eye, they were otherwise a struggle. But that's my opinion, and I didn't have to wear them, and I didn't have to like them, and hey, the Coats took it all that year, and are we not judging the corps on how well they do what they do rather than what they do it in? And in this famously free-speechy country of ours, people are free to have opinions, to pine for the good old days, or to revel in the modern innovations and wild swings of creativity, whether those are opinions about drum corps, or popular music, or government, or sports, or podcasts. I was never in favor of the designated hitter rule, but I was not in charge of Major League Baseball in 1972, so I had no say in the matter, and by the time I figured out that having pitchers go up to the plate and bat was a great way of discouraging them from throwing pitches at batters' heads, lest there be retaliation, it was too late. The DH was an established part of the game, so I sucked it up and concentrated on issues that were probably more earth-shaking. Anywho, if you visit that I Don't Support DCI page, and quite honestly, if you decide not to, you'll be doing yourself a favor, if only because it'll lessen the amount of negativity in your life. You will become immersed in a world of folks who cannot stand what the drum corps activity, and by extension the high school and college marching world, has evolved into. Mic'd up horn soloists and flowing costumes and so much in the way of scenery and sets all over the field. And admittedly, when I go to watch DCI quarterfinals at my local movie theater in August, in my mind, I will give out what I call my least amount of crap on the field award. But there are folks who are also firmly against any white line on the field other than the 50-yard line, and who look down their noses at all that concert percussion equipment all over the front sideline, and who bemoan the move away from G-bugles. To which I gently say, yeah, but was there an advantage to people carrying timpani on shoulder harnesses all summer long? And do you even remember what the brass intonation used to be like, even in the best of times? Yeesh. But see, this is me getting pulled into the negativity and the get off my lawn of it all. My argument here is not so different from how the people who design the scoring sheets for judges always talk about "'tain't what you do, it's the way that you do it." As in theory at least, we're judging corps and bands not so much on what musical material they play, but whether they play it together and in tune and with expression and all that, and whether everybody catches the rifles at the same time in the same way, and whether anybody's egregiously out of step, and from a general effect standpoint, did you sell it? Have any opinion you want. Well, except if it's grounded in outlandish conspiracy theory type thinking or the stubborn lack of common sense that seems rampant at the moment. But you can love the fact that color guard flag wavers used to wear the same uniforms as the horn line, right down to the shakos with plumes on top. And I can love the fact that people have figured out how to use electronics in really dang cool ways that actually enhance the experience of watching a drum corps show. And it's all okay. But see if you can express that love in ways that cannot quite as easily be interpreted as dumping on the stuff you don't care for, or more importantly, in ways that don't come off as dumping on the people who do like the stuff you don't care for. So, yeah, I know. By that logic, I now get to go back and rewrite a few sentences that I've already recorded. Sorry, I'll do better next time. But too often that disdain for what band has turned into can veer off into what sounds like disdain for the people who are executing it on the field. And you know what? None of those kids out there who are sweating buckets in 90-degree heat, or who are working out that last drill set as the downpour hits, or who are having to take cold showers because the host school's hot water has failed, were even born when all the drill was symmetrical and all the bugles had 2 valves and all the mallet players had to learn drill. Swing used to be called the devil's music. They used to show Elvis only from the waist up. As Captain Kirk said to Scotty in the 3rd Star Trek movie, as the Star Trek crew saw the shiny new USS Excelsior with its transwarp drive for the very first time, talk about a subject area that has more than a few very vocal critics attached to it. Come, Mr. Scott, young minds, fresh ideas, be tolerant. And on the other side of this next break, I'll chat with a friend of mine who, as it happens, will chime in on this topic briefly, because she's right in the middle of it, right now. Hope you'll stick around for that. Okay, let's change keys and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, I am pleased to be joined by, I keep having conversations hereabouts with people who have items on their resumes that very few other people or nobody have, and this week is no exception. If you've seen the episode artwork for the week, the surprise will have been given away, but even if you haven't seen it, I think it's safe to say that this summer it's going to be kind of fun to watch my guest try to top last summer. So please help me welcome to the program, Jenna Foley. Jenna!
Hi, thank you so much for having me on, Rob.
A pleasure, no doubt. My usual kickoff for these sessions almost always reveals a backstory that I wasn't expecting, even with people that I've known for at least a little while. And that kickoff is, of course, a set of questions which will inevitably give listeners a sense as to who they're listening to. So let me begin with my usual one, which is, what instrument do you play?
So I am primarily a percussionist. I just graduated from Kutztown University with a BA music major with 2 minors in musical theater and cinema, TV, media production.
How'd you get started playing percussion?
In 4th grade, I found percussion, because my dad was a percussionist. I specifically remember a story that he would tell me at the time in 3rd grade, when it was that time for kids to start thinking about what they wanted to play. You maybe did like a nursery school type thing where everybody got to like play. I didn't do that, but we just got a sheet and it was like, what do you want to play? The teacher that gave me that was Mr. Schmaus, and my father's percussion instructor in high school was Mr. Schmaus. So my dad would always tell me the story, specifically with him while I was in 3rd grade, about one point in time during, I want to say this is either his freshman or sophomore year, my father is marching out onto the field for pregame. And Mr. Schmaus is looking for his young son. I want to say his son is maybe like 5, 6, 7. And he sees his son on top of my father's bass drum marching out for pre-show. And so I remember getting the sheet and it didn't list percussion. And I was very sad. Fast forward like a week later, we're at some sort of musical that my older sister Meg is in, and Mr. Schmaus is playing in the pit. And so my dad goes up and speaks with him because that's his old percussion instructor. And he brings Mr. Schmaus like back to wherever I am. I don't think I went up with him. And Mr. Schmaus is like, all right, repeat after me. Like, because he had heard that I was upset about not being able to do percussion because it wasn't listed. Like, I remember distinctly, like, every single instrument but percussion was listed for some reason. And if that was an oversight, if they wanted something particular, and like fast forward to the next year, there's like 6 of us. So it somehow got out that you could do percussion. But specifically with me, Mr. Schmaus comes back to wherever I am in the auditorium. And he goes, repeat after me. And we spend, I want to say, like 4 minutes doing this. And he's like, all right, you're in. That was my first ever audition. Whoa. um,
Not everybody gets an audition when they're 9.
yeah.
It's not everybody, and it's certainly not been anybody who's been on this podcast yet who has shared a teacher with a parent.
Yeah, and I've actually shared multiple teachers within like my whole family. Like there definitely were teachers in the LHS school system. I went to Livingston High School in the Livingston public school system in New Jersey. There were quite a few that like my sisters had, and I am 6 and 12 years younger than both my sisters. So there was like time for like teachers to change out and so on and so forth. For example, a teacher that my eldest sister had when she was in kindergarten, I had in 5th grade. So that's a 12 plus year difference. But specifically with the music teachers, so I had Mr. Schmaus, who passed away within the past few years, but I also had Mr. Tragula in 8th grade, and my father had him in middle school. My father had Mr. Tragula his 2nd year of teaching at Heritage Middle School, and I had Mr. Tragula the 2nd to last year he taught. And I'm very thankful to have had that connection. It was super cool.
So I'm here to predict that you have a laundry list of bands that you've been active with in your life.
4th and 5th grade elementary school band. 6th grade, Livingston's weird. We like to seclude the 6th graders. So like that's the best way I can explain it. It's definitely weird. So Mount Pleasant Middle School with Mr. Horn. 7th grade, once again with Mr. Miskiv. 8th grade with Mr. Tragula. 9th grade through 12th grade with Mr. Jed Wobnick in concert band. 9th grade is when we were able to start marching band, and I started on bass drum. I was on bass drum my first 2 years. I gotta shout out that bass line, all girl bass line, and that was super cool.
Interesting.
I remember like my second home game hearing like just somebody, I don't know if it was from our high school, opposing high school, but it was like, oh, all girl bass line. And I like remember hearing that, and I was like, yeah. Cool, like empowered a tiny bit, but like also freaking out because I'm about to go on for a marching show. So but I played the tenors in high school for 2 years, my junior and senior year, and I was also drum major those 2 years. Those 2 years I also, and this is how we know each other, attended George Parks Drum Major Academy, specifically the Super DMA UMass location. But after my final year and everything with LHS, I auditioned and got onto the drum line at Kutztown University.
Which was the point at which I will confess I began to pay proper attention to the Kutztown University marching unit. Oops, it was there all along. But so you spent 4 years there, and then your major required a 5th year of you.
Going into my 5th year of college, I knew my back couldn't take another year of drumline, or at least needed a break from going 8 years straight, essentially. With Kumu this past season in 2023, I was their president. I was in charge of Cube Crew, which we spelled Kubekrew, because, you know, KU. I was on Crew which was like our student staff support team. And I was also multiple times this season the voice of Kumu, including at J. Bernie Crum for Collegiate Marching Band Festival, which that was really cool.
At that point, at the end of year 5 at Kutztown, you've done a whole lot of drumming on fields, and you've done a whole lot of drum majory, conductory sort of things, which sets up my last traditional question, which I know is going to kick us into a topic, and we both know what that is. And dear listener, you've seen the episode artwork, so you know. The question is, do you currently have a band-related role? And I know that you do.
Yes, I do have 2 band-related roles. I am the drumline and drum major tech at Blue Mountain High School in Orexburg, PA. I've been that since 2022. This will be my 3rd season with them. I'm super stoked to be back for another year with them. So my other band-related role that I currently have is in 2023, I was contracted as head drum major for Fusion Corps Drum and Bugle Corps based out of Morris County, New Jersey, and we're gearing up for another summer.
Now, how do you get connected with them?
That's a funny story. So towards the end of the spring semester of 2023, I was really looking to get back onto the field. I had already kind of had an inkling that I probably wasn't going to do drumline at Kutztown again, like just of how my back was. I started seeing a chiropractor and all of that. So I was kind of already had an inkling I probably wasn't marching this coming Kutztown season. The show announcement made it really hard because they announced it, and I was like, there's a drumline camp. Maybe I suffer through one more season with my back and then deal with that afterward. But in the summer, I was really just like, I was just itching to get back onto the field. But so I was also in a bunch of just random marching groups, including Women Plus of Drum Corps. Early May, I put in the chat like, hey, I'm based out of New Jersey/PA. I'm looking for just some part-time conducting thing if anybody needs any help. Like, it was kind of just throwing it out to the universe to see if anything would come back. And oh boy, did something come back. Shortly, I want to say within the next 24 hours, I get a message from Holly Marino, the director of Fusion Corps. She opens up her message with, we have a lot of mutuals of people who have marched in the Corps. I saw your post on Women of Drum Corps, Women Plus of Drum Corps. I look through her mutual friends and like our mutual friends, and when I say mutuals out the wazoo, like, is there somebody that Holly and I don't know is, I think, the better question. And so she suggests that I come to their upcoming drum major auditions. And I'm like, okay, let's see how I'm feeling that weekend, because I got out my wisdom teeth 3 days prior to that weekend that she wanted me to come to. And like a lunatic, I went 3/4/5 days post-op.
My knowledge of you up to that point suggested to me that there was a certain amount of enthusiasm there, which you, for example, brought to DMA, and that's the kind of thing that we cannot teach there. We can teach people to wave their arms and how to teach, but we cannot necessarily plug into the little brain USB port. Here's some enthusiasm. But that is kind of above and beyond, it strikes me.
Yeah, I guess that's like not normal.
It really says something. And in this moment, I'm going to focus on what it says that's positive.
Yeah.
and not crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. That weekend was also miserable, not only because wisdom teeth, but it was downpouring rain. So my first experience of any real doing drum corps per se, not necessarily watching, was just downpour rain. So I do go back the next day. I get to conduct a little more that day. I'd conducted a little bit Saturday, but not all that much because it was a big drill learning day for them. But I get to conduct ensemble. We get to like an hour or so before the end, and at one point I feel like probably like one of my stitches come out, and I just turn around, and it's a person on admin, which ends up becoming one of my dear friends, Bill. And I turn around and I look at Bill, and I'm like, I think a stitch just fell out. Oh, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. He's like, do you need to come down? Like, we understand. No. And I'm like holding my face. And I'm like, no. There was that moment. I remember there was a moment where I said set really loudly, especially being 4 days post-op. And I just hear, I don't know what section it came from, but I hear an audible, whoa. We all get in a circle for the core song at the end of the weekend. And their core song is For Good, with some lyrics changed. So I don't know all the lyrics changed, but like it was really nice, like just being able to kind of hop in and be able to sing part of it, especially since For Good is an important song at Drum Major Academy. It's
a little inside baseball here. It's the song that they use as the backing track for the montage of all the photos that we've taken of all the DMA students all week.
Yeah. So having For Good at DMA and then having it transfer over to Fusion Corps, but it's like a nice full circle in a way of just like how the world continues to connect. I mean, there's the 7 degrees of everything. And so I got asked at the end of the weekend, like, do you think you're coming back? And I was like, yeah, like I'll be back.
Undoubtedly somebody there said, if she's coming back after this particular weekend, we may have something here.
It was a mess of a weekend, but it was a brilliant weekend, if that makes any sort of sense.
So they offered you a contract.
They offered me a contract, and that was about a month and a half before our first show.
So in some sense, you kind of parachute drop into this. How long had the Corps been working before you arrived?
The open house for Fusion Corps was Thanksgiving weekend of 2022.
So this new person drops in and is suddenly one of the drum majors. I don't know a lot about specifically drum corps understandings of things. I don't know whether this happens a lot or not very much. Getting into a situation like that not terribly long before there's an actual performance going to go on, and in theory in a leadership position where you kind of have to build up trust between yourself and a group like that. Talk a little bit about what that was like. Was that a challenge, or did that go more smoothly than I'm imagining?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was a challenge. Think about it in the members' shoes. You're kind of, there's this random person who's probably way too energetic. Suddenly on top of a podium, you're supposed to follow this person. I know another example of it actually from last year with Peyton Briller of Spirit of Atlanta, which was actually one of my students at Drum Major Academy at Westchester. She very last minute went to like the last 4 days of their spring training and then immediately hopped on tour.
Wow.
So, but it was weird. It definitely to the members, like it must have had to felt like that Aladdin scene where it's like, do you trust me? And they kind of just had to put their hand in mine. Being thrusted into the leadership position with essentially 4 weeks before our first performance, 5 weeks before our first performance, it definitely was crazy. And I'm very thankful to the membership for kind of just like going with the flow, if you will. And there's bumps in any situation, no matter if like it could be curated absolutely perfectly. But I mean, we had a successful season in my opinion, and we get up to Rochester for finals. This is the last Drum Corps Associates finals because this year is the first year of the merge of DCA essentially being under the DCI umbrella and now being called All Age Division. Prelims came and went. That was pretty cool. And finals night, we have a killer final run. So we placed third. And then, I mean, I'm extremely humbled and honored to be able to say this, but I took home the award for best open class drum major at DCA, which I'm also the final person to receive that award. That, because like I had known that was there, like that award, like I know of it. I knew that that was like something to strive for. It wasn't like something I was like personally being like, I have to get this, blah, blah, blah. Like if I got it, then I got it. Like, then that's cool. And I remember in that moment, like we're all standing there for retreat, and I'm like slightly holding my breath. I'm just like, whatever happens is whatever happens. Like again, I'm not anticipating this. This is my first year. Like there's other people that have been doing this longer, and then they announce best open class drum major fusion corps. I hear the whole corps essentially cheering behind me. The people to my left and right like cheering and be like, "Yeah, Jenna, like way to go! Like I knew it." And so we all go up to accept it. And it's just like montage in a movie. Like it just like kept going, if that makes sense. And like
time did not stand still. Time got up and spun around.
Yeah, and it just was like, whoa.
Recognizing that this is an audio-only podcast and you all can't see it, we're recording here on Zoom, and Jenna's facial expression right now is not that different from the one that's on the episode artwork with her holding the lute.
I had people come up to me at Kutztown, specifically Dr. Neuenschwander, the director of bands, and he was like, saw what you did this past weekend. Great job. I was like, thank you. Like that means a lot. It's truly just like insane to think about. I posted my Fusion Corps post, but I had a bunch of people commenting on that from the Corps that were like, that's my best drum major. And I was like, whoa.
A comment like that from a member of the Corps is a big deal, whether or not you're holding hardware.
Yeah. Hearing it from the members themselves, whether it be through a phone screen or like they come up to me and just like, best drum major. Like,
and it's not sarcasm.
Yeah, and it's not sarcasm. Ooh, that's also a strong point right there. They all believed in me that much, and they all respected me that much by the end of the season. And like we had talked earlier, like I got thrown in there, and again, like Aladdin moment, they had to put their hand in mine and just trust me.
Now there are people that might have gotten to that point and said, if I retire now, I retire with a 1,000 batting average. But you're going back. You're going to do it again.
Round two.
But in a year in which things will be a little bit different.
DCA is falling under the DCI umbrella as now the DCI All Age Division. So we're still keeping the separations of World Open and A class, but just now under the DCI umbrella. A lot of our things are backed by it. Our season is moved up by 3 weeks because we would end Labor Day while the junior corps would end like the second week/weekend of August. Yeah, so our finals is moved up, and meaning our whole entire season's moved up. However, we didn't start any earlier. We
Interesting.
still started Thanksgiving weekend. So it's a bit of a time crunch. If that'll be different next year, that's a next season thing to know. But aside from it being an earlier season, a lot of our DCA shows, if you will, are now DCI shows, but with all of us in it. Now it's still a lot of the DCA focused. Like, for instance, I believe like the Bushwhacker Invitational that we have will be very DCA or DCI all age heavy. Also, like rehearsal spaces are more mandated by DCI. Well, sorry, rehearsal spaces for shows are more mandated by DCI, not necessarily like where we rehearse on the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
for like just regular rehearsals. And then we also switched from using high school hashes to college hashes.
Oh,
Yeah, it has improved. Like, it's not a huge difference. Like, I remember like when going from high school to college and being like, oh, okay,
28 steps. Okay.
yeah, it's a slight difference, but there definitely is a difference. It's definitely seen, and I do think it's going well. I mean, again, we're still in the early stages of it. It's nice like seeing that stability, if you will.
So, in your little neighborhood of DCA in the Fusion Core world, you're not the newbie anymore.
No, I'm not. It's nice having a year under my belt now, kind of know what I'm doing. Been there then like from the start.
And now you know the Fusion Core version of For Good.
Every week when we sing the chorus song, it's super special, and I get to sing it with some of my best friends in the whole world. I am extremely thankful for my time at Fusion Core.
Mm-hmm. So, in spite of the fact that you and I go back quite a ways, nonetheless, the questions that I ask toward the end of these conversations always seem to reveal to me stuff about the people I talk to that I didn't know. And so I'm prepared for this, and I will ask you the first question, and I will stand back. And that question is, what's one of your favorite pieces of band music that you've played, outdoors, indoors, wherever?
Indoors, it's got to be split between two. I did Jungle Dance in 8th grade in concert band, and that's super fun. And it's just a heavy percussion song, very like Latin-esque. You can imagine if you haven't heard the piece. That I remember being super fun. And then my senior year of high school, um, I also played Godzilla Eats Las Vegas by Eric Whitacre, which is a very big choir guy. So it's very random for this thing to happen or this piece to exist and it be made by him. If you can get anything from the title of it, you know you're in for a ride. It's usually paired with a PowerPoint, which we had. There are Elvis impersonators. There like it's a lot. And I remember our band director, Mr. Jed Wobnick, he walks off stage real quick and he's like, one moment. And he comes back out wearing something like the dinosaur on the bottom, but on top, Elvis. So, and conducted it like that. There's a moment where it's like distinctively supposed to be the first victim in quotation, like, and that's written, I believe, in like the mallet part. And I was on aux percussion, but we had discussed, since I was the only female in percussion in Wind Symphony that year, that I was going to do the bloody murder scream. However, that somehow didn't get to the guy, his name's Miles, that was playing mallets. So we get to that part in our very first rehearsal and we like stop, because I think the scream is also like maybe on a downbeat, or like we stop like right around where the scream's supposed to be, and Miles just screams. I remember Mr. J being like, we're going to let Jenna handle that. Specifically with college, I know you didn't necessarily say that it had to be one or the other. I love every single show I've been part of, but I think the one that really takes it home is KU Airlines, which was 2021. All original music, and it was really nice for it being the show that got us back into the swing of things post-COVID. In general, that band camp, I was like, oh, we're back. We are so back.
I'll reverse the polarity on that. Is there a piece of band music that you haven't played but you would like to?
A show that I would have like loved to have been in / like played any of that repertoire would have to be Riffs and Revelations, Blue Coats 2022. Garden of Love, Blue Coats 2023 was also amazing. I mean, bump.
Yeah.
But like being within that atmosphere of either Riffs or Garden of Love would have been really cool with Blue Coats. And then to wrap up this question, I also got to shout out Troopers 22 with Oil, and specifically their drum major at the very end. The drum major turns around and it's like, oil, and then touches the top of his hat, and there's oil on his hat, and he's looking at it and he's rubbing it on his face, and he's like going insane, right? Because like it's the whole like point of like, oh, you struck an oil rig, like you made gold, like that's the whole premise of it. So seeing like specifically that theatrics, and whether or not you enjoy the theatrics and DCI, that's a whole other can of worms that I see way too much on Facebook. If that could have been me, like I think about it a lot, and I'm just like, that could be so cool. And I like even asked like at the very beginning of the season with Fusion, and I was like, can you give me something a little theatrical? Like, it's absolutely completely 1,000% fine if you can't, but like I at least like, let me put it into your brain, like maybe give me something a little theatrical.
So I don't know whether you just answered this question. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Is there a band that you'd love to perform with that you haven't?
So alternate reality, Jenna would have loved to have been a part of Rifts and Revelations, would have loved to have been a part of Garden of Love, would have loved to have been a part of Oil with Troopers, and Last of the Sun last year with them as well would have been amazing. I can't mention drum corps without saying Spartacus. Like, if there was another all age corps that would have been cool to be a part of, it definitely would have been Buccaneers, specifically for the connection to Mr. Parks, because they do show us a Buccaneers documentary at DMA that I absolutely adore. That's probably like one of my favorite small lectures that happens at DMA. But to be a Buccaneer, that would be cool. Again, alternate reality. Yeah. I cannot stress enough that I love my time with Fusion Core, and I'm extremely happy with it. But alternate reality, Earth 22, Jenna, being a Buccaneer would be really cool.
Tell me one of your favorite band stories.
We went to Disney my freshman year of high school with the band. In one of the meetings, like with the students and the parents prior to the trip, they were just like going over like, being responsible and blah, 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 and like meals and stuff. And they specifically said like, your child's getting a meal per day, but they're on their own otherwise. So kids, like, don't be upset if you like buy a giant stitch on the first day, and then are trying to like auction them off for money on the last day because you need to eat. So all of us hearing that, we're like, that'd be funny. So we all like pitched in, or not all of us, but a very good chunk of the band pitched in about, I want to say $5 each. And we got Mr. J a giant stitch. And so we presented it to him after we had marched down Main Street. So like later that night, right before fireworks, we all go present it to him. And there's a video of this. I just like, you can just see like, he's like, you guys didn't like, you guys really heard that and latched onto it and then got me something of it. And it's just like the expression of like, man, these kids are my kids, and like they're silly, and they're gonna do sweet things like this. But that Stitch doll is still with the band. It sits in a locker at LHS, and it has a drum major uniform on, because the uniforms that they currently had, like the uniform that I wore, there was a drum major the first year that they had them that was like extremely petite, and petite enough to where that uniform hasn't, one, fit anyone else since, and two, it could fit the stitch. Like, yes, we had to roll up the sleeves, but the torso essentially fit.
And therefore it's been unavailable since.
I really love that story, because again, it's just like the pinnacle of like band members not only love the activity they're in, but they love the people that are involved in the activity.
Well, wonderful it has been to do this. It has been too long since we sat down and just threw it back and forth.
Way too long.
For sure, all podcast hosts are required to close their interviews by asking the question, where can people follow you online if you wish to be followed online?
Yes, I do have a professional music page, both on Instagram and Facebook at Jenna Foley Music. And you can also keep up with Fusion Core this summer at Fusion Core with an _ at the end on Instagram, and just Fusion Core on Facebook, along with our website.
Percussionist, marching arts educator, current drum major of Fusion Core, Jenna Foley. Thanks so much for coming on the pod. And hey, everybody, you know who to root for this summer.
Thank you so much for thinking of me to come on this.
Well, good luck out there, and may it all go according to plan. Bandwagon will return on the other side of this brief pause for breath. Thanks so much for staying with me. Here comes the dogfight. This week's Dogfight is another band-related social media story, but in contrast to the hand-wringing I did in the second strain about that one particular Facebook group, I'm going in the other direction, hand-clapping, positive reinforcement. It's a tale which, although it took place an undisclosed number of years ago, it could have happened yesterday, considering how little the great big world has changed in the intervening time. One day, that undisclosed number of years ago, I did the online writing equivalent of setting off one mousetrap in a warehouse full of them. My Facebook status post was a comment that was faintly political, but I thought more about manners than policy. And not long after, without any further effort on my part, I had played host to one of those political firestorm comment threads. Of course, I concurred with the thoughts of about half the people who added comments to the post. But what struck me about the exchange was how much it seemed to parallel the state of the states in that moment. Lots of commentators were noting that we could hardly talk to each other if it involved political beliefs. The particular commentators who chimed in on my Facebook post represented an intriguing demographic. They were, each of them, from a slightly different moment on my timeline of involvement with college bands. One was from my UMass marching days, one was from my early days with the Boston University Band, one was from later on in my Terrier Band time, and one was from my years with the band at the College of the Holy Cross. All of them spoke band. Not a one of them was a woodwind player, therefore they had all seen the front sideline. To my flute friends, I say, sorry, but you know that's not an exaggeration. I'm commiserating here. Two of my commenters were not very happy with the assertion I had made about one of the gentlemen that was currently running for president. Two other commenters were not very happy with the assertions that the first two had made. Politics aside, though, all four of them would have been entirely happy to get on the same hypothetical band bus and make the straight run for whatever hypothetical stadium at which our hypothetical good guy college football team was going to be playing on some hypothetical Saturday, if they were all hypothetically the same approximate age, which they were definitely not. They all would have sung the bus songs with vigor. They all would have charged onto the field at halftime with the same air of, let me at it. They all would have been among the last students to leave the band room, the armory, or Old Chapel, after making sure everything had been put away at the end of the trip. Online, separated by, in some cases, thousands of miles, they went after each other pretty lustily, and with the same courtly, polite vehemence that I imagine medieval knights must have exhibited right before jousts. Good sir, I surely will damage you anon. In person, they all would have hugged each other pretty hard on senior day and at band banquet, and when they met again on homecoming, right before the start of alumni band rehearsal. Then, as now, we were in a tough spot. People were seemingly less and less capable of remaining civil when discussing politics, never mind seeing eye to eye. But one thing was, and is still, true, I think. Band is a place for everyone. And so, I would judge, is this podcast. I'll pause briefly and then come right back to put the finishing touches on the episode. To wrap up this week, let's take the CODA. For the CODA this week, relatively speaking, most of this episode has been on the heavy side. So, to close out this week on an upward trajectory, here's a story I was told by a middle school band director friend of mine a while ago. She said, I ended up helping unload one of the minibuses this morning, which I've never helped with before. I met the bus driver and introduced myself as the band director. The driver said, I was in a band once. I was told I play like I'm in prison. I'm always behind bars without a key. That's BandWagon for this week. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. BandWagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at our website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback, be polite, but let me know what you like or what you think might change. You can do that using our email address, heybandwagon@yahoo.com, or leave us a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that we do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. All those contact links and links to our news items, conversation topics, and my interview guest, Jenna Foley, can be found in our show notes. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, get someone else to listen as well. As it turns out, word of mouth is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with us every week, subscribe to BandWagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please rate and review. It really helps other people to find the show. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton. detail, gush and go.